told them, I've got the full stuff, I told them. They gone to some to say that she had put the charge, and then because that way it went through the case.
That's what they want to see, yeah.
Yeah. And I said, well, and they paid it. I'm not sure really out of that. Doesn't it? I have to go down Sunday and back on Tuesday.
One thing.
It's on now?
Yep.
So I'm not sure if I
It being 7 o'clock, we're going to get started on the June 8th meeting. First on the agenda is old new business, which would be the approval of the minutes from the meeting of May 11th, 2017. We have a motion regarding the minutes from the meeting of May 11th, 2017.
You guys want to go through them for a second?
Since he wasn't here, I can do it.
Do we want to table this to the end, and you gentlemen can have a moment to read them at that point, and then we can do it?
Sure.
Okay.
Yes, that would be best.
All right. So moving on then, the Vice Chair will read the petition for the continued hearing of Mark Bogan regarding 0 Adams Street.
The Town of Abington Boards of Zoning Board of Appeals will hold a public hearing on Thursday, May 11th. Is it okay with
there, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. May 11th at 7 o'clock at the Abington offices, 500 Kowalski Way, Abington, on the petition of Mark Bogan, property managers, 41 Federal Ave, Quincy, for a use variance under 175 21G5, special permit under 175 21H5, and special permit under 175 35G to allow the construction of a 2,500 square feet building for the outburst use for the open lot storage of material at 0 Adams Street. The property is located at Sisters Map 69, Lot 1, 1B, in the TB zone.
All right, so this is a continued hearing, so the voting members were, was it myself, it was Mr. Negrelli, and who was and Dennis. Thank you. Just boilerplate here from the Sewer Commission, detailed plans for this proposal located on Assessors Plan 69 Lot 1 must be submitted to this office prior to building permit sign-off. I think I had that last time, so just handing that over. All right, Attorney Whitney.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Ronald Whitney on behalf of the applicant here tonight, Bogan Management, Property Management, and Mark Bogan, who is over here to my far left. Also have with me this evening Sean Hardy, who was here at our previous meeting. I appreciate the time that you spent with us the last hearing that we had last month, and certainly the time spent this evening. You'll recall that this proposal, this petition for relief involves the property at 0 Adams Street, and it's property currently owned by Paul Barry in a trust known as the Brenton Realty Trust, and it is vacant land and has been vacant for as long as I know. And I grew up in South Weymouth, right down the street from this property, and it was vacant back in the 60s, and to my knowledge has not been built on in all the years since. So Mr. Bogan is in the tree business, you'll recall. He's an arborist, and what he proposes to do is to build a small building of about 4,000 square feet, and to use a roughly 8.5 acre parcel for the processing, storage of materials, storage of vehicles, and so on and so forth. I don't know if the board has the plan immediately in front of them, but it's this plan here, just to refresh the board's memory. What it involves is this 8.5 acre parcel, which is significantly encumbered by wetlands. You'll see the wetland delineation line around the outside of this uplands area, which is approximately 5 acres. There's a dirt roadway going into the premises, and then this is where the roughly 4,000 square foot building would be sited. We went through our presentation the last time, and I don't want to misspeak, but I think the board was somewhat satisfied that the applicant made out a good case for 2 of the 3 prongs that are necessary hurdles in seeking zoning relief. That is, it's specifically in seeking a variance. The first is whether or not there was a hardship, financial or otherwise, that related to the shape, topography, or soil conditions on this lot, such that zoning relief may be appropriate. And the presentation was that with the significant wetlands that exist on the property, that creates a hardship when it comes to trying to market the property and develop the property for a number of uses, because it's very likely that there would never be an opportunity to make this high property, the uplands in the middle of the property, visible from the street, such that any type of a retail business or any type of business for that matter that needed some type of visibility would ever be able to take advantage of this particular lot. Secondly, the prong that suggests that does the proposal derogate from the intent and purpose of the bylaw? And the suggestion that I made to the board the last meeting was that it does not. The intent and purpose of the, I'm sorry, was there any substantial detriment, I should say, with respect to this proposal? If this proposal were to go forward, does it create a substantial detriment to the surrounding properties? And I suggested to the board at that time that it did not. And most of the properties in this vicinity are industrial properties, the way they've been built. And in fact, if we go back to pre-2000, this district in particular was an industrial district. And if we look at the assessors' records for the property, and I have them here, you'll note on these assessors' records that the use of the property, use description of the property that's still shown today on the assessors' records is industrial.
Thank you.
Yeah. So the issue of the hardship, I think, is satisfied by the shape and particularly by the topography of the site. It doesn't appear to create any substantial detriment to the neighborhood because it is very well insulated from other neighboring uses, and most of the neighboring uses are industrial in nature. And so we then got in the last hearing to the point where we were speaking about whether or not the proposal derogates from the intent and purpose of the bylaw. And we spoke specifically about what this district is, and I noted that the district was the technology business district, and we got into a rather lengthy discussion about the intent and purpose of the bylaw with respect to the technology business district. I promised the board that I would do some research, and I've done a little bit of research with respect to the technology business district, and I have for the board a copy of the pertinent parts of the Town of Abington 2000 annual report. There's a number of copies if you want to pass them in. And in the annual report, you'll see noted 2 articles One article was to change the zoning in this particular area, and if I may offer this to the board as well.
Yeah, I think.
The area that we're talking about is Adams Street, to the very north end of Abington, Route 58, that little blue, light blue area on the zoning map. So in the 2000 annual report, you'll see that there were two articles. One was to rezone that area from industrial to technology business. And the second was to pass rather extensive regulations with respect to transfer stations. And in particular, at the time, there was a proposal before the town, not a proposal, I should say. At the time in 2000, it had been passed by the Board of Health, an 1,800-ton a day transfer station, and there became a great controversy over that. And as a consequence, there were a number of legal issues that took place between the town and the developer, Mr. Barry. And finally, in 2004, the license was rejected by the state, and the proposal went away. But in the interim, this technology business district had been created, and I would suggest to the board that it was by and large created in response to that proposal and to the passage of that transfer station by the Board of Health back in the late 90s. So since we were here before you last month, we've been to the Planning Board and to the Conservation Commission, and the Conservation Commission has given us their complete approval of the project. It was unanimous, a unanimous vote of the commission to approve Mr. Bogan's proposal. And we went before the Planning Board last week, and at that time, the Planning Board looked at it and determined that they did not need to necessarily vote on the proposal. They expressed their blessings for the proposal. Nobody had any objections to the proposal, but they did not need to, at the end of the night, they felt that they did not need to vote on it for two reasons. One is that the actual site, the smaller site with the building on it, was approved by them 2 years ago. And so they felt that the applicant could stand on that approval and there'd be no further approvals necessary. With respect to the larger site, they felt that because there were no improvements being made on the site, that the proposal could go forward without any form of planning board approval. But again, we did talk for some length with the board, and the board expressed their comfort with the proposal. I did a little riding around the district the other day. That is the technology business district. Just to determine what uses are being made of the property up in that area. And the technology business district, this is just a blow-up of the assessors records here in town. The technology business district is, as was shown in that small plan in light blue, this is it on the northerly end of Bedford Street and Adams Street here in town. And you'll see that Ron's Motorcycle, there's an open land area here where earthen materials are stored, trucks come in and out. The GameStop, the South Shore Terminal, the troop disposal, the retail plaza, the self-storage, and the pool place. I'd suggest to the board that under the technology business district, most of those uses would be non-conforming. And so this use that is proposed in the bylaw, it suggests that it would not be allowed, this use would not be allowed in that district. I would suggest to you, and I have a bunch of pictures here that I want to just pass to the board. And these are pictures of the use of the surrounding parcels. And you'll note that the use of the surrounding parcels are for businesses that are very in keeping with what Mr. Bogan is proposing for his parcel. And that is that there are trucks, there's storage of materials like bark mulch and wood chips and so forth. The troop rubbish disposal people have a significant site up there. And there were some Hollamore trucks that I noticed up there. So various retail uses, various industrial type of uses are there in the district, and I would suggest that that is indicative of the district as it has historically been, and probably will continue to be for the foreseeable future. This is just a couple of news articles that I pulled out with respect to the trash transfer station, and you'll see that the news articles come from the year 2000. So that was still a hot button issue back in the day when this district became known in Abington. Mr. Bogan, as I mentioned at the previous hearing, has been very successful. He runs an operation up in Quincy. What's the name of the highway?
Bergen Parkway.
Bergen Parkway. And he's in the arborist business. He has 21 trucks? Approximately 21 trucks, and employs how many people?
About 20.
About 20 people. And so he'll keep that operation if this proposal before you is approved by your board. He'll continue to operate out of Quincy, and this will be an auxiliary site for him. He's very excited about coming to Abington. Wants to employ people here, wants to run a business here, register some of his vehicles here, pay taxes on the property, and I can assure you, based on his operation and just a viewing of his operation up there in Quincy, the board would, I'd be confident in saying that the board, 2 years out, if this is approved, would be very comfortable with the proposal and the business in that location. I would be more than happy to answer any questions that the board has, as would Mr. Hardy and Mr. Bogan.
In keeping with that, one of the things we had Nancy do, which was similar to what you supplied, Mr. Whitney, with the town report dated 2000 on there, was the, Nancy dug up the warrant for the special town meeting, 23rd October 2000, where they were discussing the creation of the technology business district, because that's, I think, got to be one of the sticking points at the end of the last meeting. And so officially the district's intent, technology business, also known as the TB, to encourage the development of computer technology, internet business, and other technology-related business in which does not include noxious land uses. Amending, I mean, I think that was the main thing, and then as you had implied a month ago, Solid felt that the creation of the TB was a reaction to the potential transfer station. And they did indeed put a footnote saying solid waste facilities are prohibited in the technology business district, which is of course in our book at this point. I just kind of want to read that into the record at that point, because that was kind of where we left off last time and go forward this time. I wanted to start with that. Also wanted to just mention, we did get official notice from the planning board. They did meet, they reviewed our agenda, and they actually had no comment on any of the petitions on the agenda, so, you know, they just, that's the official notice. Do you gentlemen have any questions or follow-ups at this point?
Yeah, I did actually have a question, and I don't know, I apologize, I don't know if this was covered last week, but you said the property was going to be approximately 4,000 square foot building?
Yes.
I was just, because the petition, and it looks like the minutes from last week talk about a 2,500 square foot building.
Yes, yeah, I can explain the difference. 2 years ago, Mr. Barry had approved a 4,000 square foot, 4,500 square foot building. So in looking at the application, it didn't make sense to go back and rework what had already been done and approved. And so what's shown on this plan right here is different than what the applicant is going forward on this lot. In other words, the applicant is comfortable in going forward with the proposal from 2 years ago, and the planning board has given him their blessing in doing so. And so the difference being that there is less bituminous pavement on the plan from 2 years ago. The building's a little bit bigger, but the bituminous pavement, I don't want to speak out of turn, but I think that would be fair to say, Sean.
A lot less pavement, and a slightly bigger building. Going back with some of the review comments from the planning board engineer, he had some concerns about water coming off of Adams Street and needing a culvert, and they were concerned about a turning radius where we were sharing a driveway. So by the time we got done altering things, it started looking more like what was approved before, so we said, why not just build what was approved before, because it was already approved.
I guess my concern at that point would be, though, I mean, your application is specifically for a 2,500 square foot building, so at this point, we're approving something that's outside the scope of what your initial request was.
Well, we're asking you to approve the use variance. The building that was approved before.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah, and I see
Surely
your
that's
point,
a problem.
Andrew. In this case, it's a matter of, can they do this to the land? It's not, I think for as long as there's setbacks.
Okay.
We can't approve anything that's more than what they've actually asked for
Mhm.
in the form. I think that's what Andrew's saying. That, you've asked for one relief, and now you're asking for another relief. And we really only can approve what you've actually filed with us.
Well, what we're asking for is the use. The use doesn't change, whether the building's 25 or 4,500 square feet. What we're asking for, the issue is the use variance. That, yeah.
Can I?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just, the issue isn't about, stop me if I'm wrong, Marshall, but I don't think it's about the building, whether it's, 100 square feet or 5,000. It's about, can they run this type of business on the land, right?
No.
He's asked for a use variance,
Right.
and he's mentioned the size of the building. I think if you were to look at it, that it would be, you'd approve the use, but the building would be subject to whatever has to be gone through as I'm sending it to planning with regards to drainage and, access, etc. So you would be approving that area that he's suggesting, I guess, for the use, but not mentioning buildings would be the only way they would be able to look at this. Because he has asked for specifics with regards to a building, but if not, you just approve the use and not the building.
Unless it comes back and amends.
And then, subject to what planning approves with regards to his drainage plan, site plan, and building. I would guess it's the way that would have to go, but I'd probably be checking with council.
Which is-
I respectfully submit that, what is written in the application is what we have to go through, go forward with. And what we approve is what your application is. And actually, although, we're actually focused on the use for a very obvious reason, because it really is, maybe if we can't get past this use issue, and everything else falls by the wayside, right? And so that's why everybody's focused on that. But if we weren't focused on that, you know, you're also looking for a special permit under 175.31H and a special permit under 175.35G for construction of the building. And by the way, you actually label it as a 2,500 square foot building in the notice. Now, 175.35G involves the I have to look it up here, I'm afraid, but it's the
I
wetlands.
think it's the
Floodplain.
floodplain overlay district. isn't it?
Is that what it is?
I think that's what they do.
Yeah.
We'll have to
Yeah.
double check.
Yeah.
It is.
Well, and there's a good reason why Mr. Whitney said that, because we can look here at the newspaper article back in, whatever it was, 2004, and they were talking about, well, you know, it's a soggy site, and the design that Mr. Barry had would not, required 2 feet of separation between the site's groundwater level and the facility's lowest point. So if we look aside, if we take aside from the use, let's talk about water for a second. Do you have any comments, Marshall, on that?
Yeah, with the wetland protection overlay district, are you asking for the relief granted, for them to grant you relief to build in that area
Yeah, that's one.
without without going through all of the required documentation that has to be done?
Well, we've been through conservation. Conservation has reviewed it last week in detail, and they gave us a unanimous vote in favor.
So you have.
And further, the proposal for the 4,500 square foot building was approved. The drainage calculations were approved 2 years ago. The planning board, when we were before them last week, we noted to them what we wished to do. They said, well, that's fine with us because we've approved this previously.
What about the letter that you had in your application, which I don't have in front of me, but it was from your expert? It said these things have to be identified. And we talked about that. It was to do with water, and we talked about that at our last meeting. And you said you were going to discuss that with the planning board.
Yep,
So
and we did.
have those things been identified?
And we did.
Can I answer
There was-
that
oh, hold on, please. There was a letter that had a number of issues with respect to the plan that had the 2,500 foot building on it. Mr. Hardy spoke with Mr. Johnson, the consulting engineer from the planning board, about the two plans, the plan that was approved 2 years ago and the plan that was the 2,500 foot plan. And at the end of the conversation, the feeling, and I wasn't part of the conversation, so I'm just going to relate what was told to me, and Mr. Hardy can tell you firsthand. The feeling was that if the plan was approved 2 years ago, and the drainage issues for that plan were all ironed out and approved by the planning board, then there would be no impediment to going forward on that plan. And that's what the two of them discussed, and that's what was reported back to the planning board, and hence, that's why the planning board gave us their blessings the other night.
Well, why don't you tell us, Mr. Hardy, so we're all, you know, we're not experts, and you're the expert. So why don't you tell us how you're going to deal with the flooding, the seasonal flooding in this site? And perhaps you could first remind us, how much soil are you going to bring in for the construction?
I didn't do a cut fill for volumes on that.
But I thought in the last meeting you had a number of how much soil was going to be.
We were raising the site by, what, I think 3 feet overall to get up into the driveway.
The small site.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
you're raising the site by 3
Yeah.
feet.
I don't think I did it. I didn't do a volume calculation.
I thought there was something else.
Or underground water.
Yeah, because we were doing underground,
So, yeah, why did you tell
We-
us how you're doing with flooding?
yeah, the initial design that you had. We had gone with a smaller building, but much more pavement, and we're going to go with subsurface structures, concrete structures under the ground. So we were proposing to capture any runoff, put it through a storm scepter to treat it, and then put it into these subsurface chambers.
You're going to build wells, cement wells into the land? You're
Yes.
going to excavate and
Yes.
put wells into
Yes. And the design for that was based off, I had used the soils from what was approved previously. I had used the elevation of the seasonal high groundwater, and I had based it off of that. The difference between our proposal and what was proposed before, in order to have the chambers and therefore more usable pavement, it meant a little bit more fill, because this previous site had collection and then it was at grade detention ponds at the back, so they're more grass, they need a little bit more maintenance, they'll have to be mowed, and some maintenance that has to go along with them. And we were occupying, through the proposal I had drawn up, much more of the site. We were creating much more impervious area, and therefore the drainage system needed to be much bigger to accommodate that. When we went, and you saw the letter from the review engineer, a lot of it had to do with the fact that because I hadn't done the test pits, I was relying on the fact that I had gone and looked at them, they were in the files here at the town hall. The groundwater elevation, that type of stuff. I relied on the previous approval, but I guess wasn't as clear as I needed to be in my presentation of that. So a number of the comments dealt with that type of stuff. How did you determine groundwater? How did you determine soil type? And I went through that I had done it based on what the previous approval was. The request, or through some of those conversations, it was asked, is it possible to shrink this down? You're using most of the site as impervious area. In the meantime, Mr. Bogan had got quotes for some of the drainage that I had proposed to maximize the site, and those chambers were starting to get expensive, and that combined with the planning board engineer had a problem with, we had a common driveway, we were going to access the existing gravel road, and we were going to come up, and that was going to access both sites, and he had concern whether trucks could make that movement. He also had concern that currently water can come off of Adams Street and make its way to the wetland, so us building that driveway would maybe obstruct some of that water and not allow it to get back into the wetland. So we were looking at a culvert that we could install to put there. So when we started, and I met with Mr. Bogan about how we were going to shrink the site, kind of try and decrease impervious area and do some of those things, combined with the expense of the concrete chambers under the ground, my design and going through talking with the review engineer started looking like what was approved 2 years ago, to the point it was like, why reinvent the wheel? This was already approved under planning, it already got all those permits. It had gone through conservation, a rigorous review there.
So I beg your pardon, but help me, what are you actually saying today that you're going to do? Because it seems to me you're saying that you're changing, you're going to go back to the old plan. So what are you going to do? What are you telling us that you're going to do to deal with runoff and water today?
Well, it's,
You're going to do culverts?
it's not culverts, it's at-grade detention, they call them infiltration basins, so they're grassed areas, and it's significant amount of grassed areas, so the water collects and runs through treatment. There's riprap swales and things designed to shed the water in and get it through, and a pretty substantial, almost a third of the upland area ends up being these at-grade detention basins, and therefore it opens up a lot more green space, it reduces the impervious area, decreases runoff from...
Is that upland area that's on the wetlands, or upland area that you've made from your 3 feet that you're going to...
No, upland stays upland anyway. Wetland is, we're not allowed to go in the wetland, and we're respecting, there's a 10-foot that was under, there's a 10-foot no-touch that we're maintaining. So anything that I say upland, it was upland, it's upland today, it's going to be upland later, it's just that we're maneuvering the grades a little bit. But this keeps that same upland area. It provides a lot more, so along where the wetlands are these detention basins, so if water does want to come up and get in, it can get in and get back out there as well. And it also allows water to come off of Adams Street like it does today and not cause ponding up on Adams Street. It can get through this substantial wetland as well.
Are you putting, by detention basins, I mean, we're talking about just grass, or you are putting those...
No, it's grass. It's
So you're not putting the cement?
Nope, it's open air, grassed area, so.
And how many cars, how many trucks are you going to have on site?
Anywhere from 0 to 20?
0 to 20?
I mean,
So
this
how
isn't
are
a
you
site,
going to- I'm sure you've had this question in conservation, but how are you going to deal with the runoff of gas, oil?
well, any building that gets built has traps, right?
Yeah, anything out front is through those calculations in the pre-treatment. There's 4 bays, sediment 4 bays, and there's some of that stuff. And Conservation issued the order of conditions, so out back, they weren't necessarily, as long as it's respecting the buffer, it's a use that's existing today, similar, and you know.
I don't think you've actually answered that for me, that I can understand, but it doesn't really matter, because I think that's not an issue. It's more an issue in conservation. I suppose the big issue is the water, the flood, and how you're dealing with that extra water that you must have, not only from the seasonal, but also from the land that you're bringing in. And to do that, you're going to do grassy mounds around the place.
Yeah, they're not
Retention
mounds, they're ponds, so they're, yeah.
I just had a couple of questions before we go too far. I did find that this prior approval here that you're referring to was for an office building. So this, to me, could make a little difference here on how the approval was back then versus what you're looking for today, because the use is going to be different than it would have been then. That's number one I want to put out. And also, you just recently said that you're going to use Abington as a auxiliary. And if I remember, you said at the last meeting that you have a lease there. Once that lease ran out, you wanted to bring it here if it is approved. Am I correct?
Correct.
Okay, so that does make,
If I may make note too, the plan that was approved 2 years ago is titled Proposed Industrial Building. So it was an industrial building then, and it's an industrial building now. It was not an office building. It was an office building, there was a much larger office building that was proposed and was approved over here. There was a 20,000-foot building that was approved, I can show it to you.
yeah.
1,000 square foot office building. And this was approved, never built because there were no takers. Mr. Barry attempted to market it, was unsuccessful in doing so.
What year was that, sir?
This is 2014.
Yes.
Yeah, and the building out front was for storage, and it was called Proposed Industrial Building, so it was
So,
similar.
you know, in relation to whatever runoff might be created, small runoff might be created by that small building out front. What was proposed and what was approved 2 years ago was significantly more intrusive.
So, I don't know if there's any more questions of the board. If there aren't, I'll open it to the floor for a moment, and then we can bring it back to the board. Do you gentlemen have any more questions?
No.
Officially opening it to the floor. Anyone? Once, twice, closing it to the floor, bringing it back.
You have anything you want to say, Mike?
So we have two questions, gentlemen. Obviously, the highest hurdle is the variance under 175-21G5 because the use is not allowed, which is why he's asking for a variance. You know, on the one hand, it's kind of obvious why the TB district was created. On the other hand, you know, it's up us to determine one of the 3 prongs of a variance been met. And does this particular, you know, is this something that fits within, you know, some point within the intent? Does it violate the intent? You know, there's not a lot of technology business in Abington, one way or the other. So, what is the hardship? You know, financial shape, topography, soil conditions, What is the proposed use going to be more detrimental? And, you know, what is unusual about the lot? I mean, I can go either way on those questions, honestly. And then the other thing is, because it's specific, the special permit 175-35G, which is the wetland overlay, building in the wetland overlay district. I do agree with you, Mr. Bergen, that because they're specifically asking for a special permit, and they're being specific regarding a 2,500 square foot building and referencing 175-35G, if the variance goes, then the vote on the special permit would have to relate only to a 2,500 square foot building. Because as you correctly said, we cannot grant something larger than what's advertised for or asked for. We can grant something smaller. So that, unfortunately, would, if you guys wanted to amend that, it would require a second, an additional hearing. But, I mean, I think the variance is the hurdle that needs to overcome at this point. You know, I get it's kind of unusual where the plot itself is two pieces of usable land. Okay, that can be considered, you know, a topographical hardship. Is it more detrimental? I'm kind of 50-50 on that. Because I think in a lot of ways there are a lot worse things you can do to the land than trees and branches and that sort of stuff. I think if it goes through hours of operation for abutters would be something we should consider. But at the same time, under the intent of 175, of the TB district, the last clause is which does not include noxious land uses. Noxious can be things that are harmful, generally relating to persons. You know, are there smells that come off from grinding stumps and cutting wood and that sort of thing? That's something we have to address. And then the third prong, I think we talked about what's unusual about the lot, the hardship. So I mean, that's where we're at. What say you gentlemen?
I still have a hard time with the district itself, how it's no solid waste. I mean, that really just kind of jumps out at me. It was a hard-fought battle to make this district the way it is, so it's there. Again, it doesn't seem like it's the use they were asking for this area. I know it's the only TV zoning in the town, but right there, it tells you that the people didn't want this here.
Right.
Meaning, they wanted this is what they wanted. And I got a hard time getting past that.
People above our pay grade said this is what we...
Yes, and the town voted on this is what they voted on. You know, and there it is. I mean, right in front of you, solid waste, as you said, you know, any type of disturbance to the area. Although you did bring up the good points about the surrounding area and what is there now. I just know that this whole thing right here was a battle, and a lot of people worked on this, and they won this. It's just kind of hard to just ignore it. And that's where I stand on that. I just find it very difficult.
I don't know if I could speak, or is it closed?
I think,
Close
I guess.
yeah.
at this point.
I can see.
Yeah.
But, so I think it was incredibly well presented, very strongly. And we definitely, want businessmen like Mr. Bagan to bring more businesses here in Abington. But I have, just reading what a variance is, under our bylaw, it says, let me see, forgive me, I'm not wearing glasses, but let me see, that such structures such as will not affect in general zone district that would involve substantial hardship, financial or otherwise, to the petitioner or appellant, and desirable relief may be granted without substantial detriment to the public good and without nullifying or substantially deviating from the intent of this bylaw. So if we take three issues here, the first one is hardship. So it seemed to me what you were saying, the hardship here was that honestly, poor Mr. Barry can't sell the land to anybody else. Mr. Bowden came along. And actually that is often a hardship that's presented to us at our meetings. But I honestly don't think this hardship actually runs to the land, but it's a hardship, I suppose, for Mr. Barry, and that's the financial hardship. Without substantial detriment to the public good, or nullifying the intent of the bylaw. So that's what we're talking about, the intent of the bylaw. And I think it's very hard to get past this. It's an excellent subject for going above, as Mr. Mullen would say, above our pay grade and asking Superior Court, well, look, other people have been able to build right in this area. Why shouldn't Mr. Bowden? But I think our job is simply to deal with the zoning bylaw as it's presented. And at the other meeting I was talking about, wouldn't it be nice if Abington had an office block if it had technology? But you know what? That's just something I said, and that's a concern, and that's totally irrelevant to this meeting, really. But what is relevant is the fact that it is a technology district. It is, of course, our only one in Abington. It definitely has potential, and this would definitely nullify the that zone and that bylaw. Like the other members, I find it very hard to get past that. I do think, as Mr. Mullen said, there are other issues to do with water and to do with the what is actually going to be built not built, but what is going to be burnt and what's going to be placed on that area, because we are talking really about a wetland all around here, this giant wetland. And so I think that is an issue too, and it's probably why they said no noxious gases, because of the wetland area. I think you made a very strong point that other businesses do exactly that are in that area. Nevertheless, I think we cannot get past the fact you can't avoid a whole zone, and that's why I was saying the planning board and the town meeting really have to look after this. But if we're implementing the bylaw, I don't think we can get past that this is a zone for technology district. And what you're asking for as a use is totally outside of that and would nullify that.
So would someone like to make a motion?
If may I be heard? No.
As a courtesy, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Just a couple of points I want to make is years ago, zoning went in Massachusetts. It was back in the 50s, the late 50s, early 60s. Most towns had adopted the zoning bylaw. And the legislature, in their wisdom, offered up variances and special permits as being something that your board and other zoning boards throughout the Commonwealth would review, so that the laws, if we were to apply the zoning bylaws strictly, I suppose there'd be no need for us to be here tonight. We would read them downstairs in Marshall's office, would decide what's allowed, what's not allowed, and there would be no need for this board. But the legislature years ago passed the Zoning Act and gave you discretion within the purview of the law, the three-pronged test for a variance. Now you speak about a hardship. I'm not sure. I've done a lot of hearings over the years in a lot of different communities. I'm not sure that I've had a piece of property that more appropriately shows a hardship that relates to the shape, the topography, and the soil conditions on this property. The topography is laced with wetlands. More than 50% of the property is wetlands. that creates a hardship, financial or otherwise. And when we talk about the intent of the bylaw, the intent of this bylaw in particular, passed in 2000, at the time that the town was having difficulty with a developer who had been approved for an 1,800-ton-a-day trash transfer station. The intent of this bylaw was to try to avoid that use going in. That's why it was put in. It wasn't, I don't believe, and I was out of politics and here in Abington by that point in time, but I don't think it was put in because people had dreams that Apple or Google or any other technology businesses for that purpose, for that reason, would come in. It was put in to try to keep something out, I would suggest to the board. And this is not something that's going to be detrimental to the neighborhood. If it were, perhaps we'd see somebody here, the last meeting, or this meeting, that would be in opposition to the same. But there's nobody that's opposed it. The Conservation Commission has given its unanimous blessing. The Planning Board has said, yep, it's good, we're good to go. The district as it's composed today, I don't think has a single technology business in it. And you do have the discretion. And the reason you do have the discretion is because the legislature can't look at these proposals as they come before each individual town. They gave it to you to use your discretion. Is this a good proposal? Is this something that could exist up in North Abington on Adams Street and not really bother anybody, employ people, and allow for tax revenue to come into the town? I'd suggest that it is. And is this something that derogates from the neighborhood? I'd suggest it doesn't whatsoever. You have the pictures in front of you. What's being proposed here as a use is exactly analogous to what's being used there now. This district was passed 17 years ago. 17 years ago. There's no technology businesses in that district. You have the authority, the townspeople, you talk about the townspeople, people with a higher grade, pay grade, okay? Those people, at some point in the past, passed a zoning bylaw that gave you the authority to issue use variances. They gave it to you for a reason, so that you would use your good judgment, your discretion, when proposals like this came before the board. This is not outside of the keeping of the neighborhood. It's not noxious to the neighborhood any more than any one of the other pictures that you saw here tonight. It's exactly analogous. We're not talking about putting this in a residential district or even a commercial highway business district. We're talking about it going up in the woods on Adams Street, protected. You know, if the board is concerned about what type of operation is this, how noisy is it, how smelly is it, there's one up the street on Route 139 that's existed in close proximity to residences across the street and around the corner. And I'm not sure, I don't take complaints here in Town Hall, but I haven't read any accounts in the newspapers that the neighbors are up in arms and that they're not able to live peacefully with that operation. I'd respectfully ask that you consider the proposal. Thank you.
I can respond quickly. So you're saying the hardship is the fact that it's wetlands?
Well, the law specifically...
Well, please, because I don't want to, last time I did this meeting went on for ages.
Yeah.
So I just quickly summarize, the hardship is the wetlands around that. And this is the best use of that land, which is bringing in wood, bringing in landscaping vehicles, and burning. You say that's the best hardship. You say
There's no burning.
There's no burning.
No burning.
No.
And you say the use is really a political thing, and we have to talk about politics and why it was done. And I really think that is out of our ken, to be honest. You say there's no detriment to the neighbourhood, so the other members were talking about the neighbourhood. And I think there's a huge apartment block right beside this site, isn't that right?
Weymouth.
In Weymouth, right.
That's not,
On the other
that's
side of,
a significant distance
How
up
far-
the street.
Who do you share your driveway with? If you,
nobody.
you don't, I thought you just said you'd share your driveway.
That's one.
Next to this property is the FedEx trucking terminal,
Right,
and then I think is the Weymouth line.
yeah.
And then
there's
there's-
Weymouth line.
Then there's an apartment building on it.
There's also a historical marker called a heap of stones. It's actually called a heap of stones, the oldest historical marker. But there is an apartment block right there, and they're in Weymouth. They would be right beside us. But I think the biggest issue, which the biggest point that you make, is that it's up to us to, we're given the use, the idea of use variance, but it is a use variance within limits. And within limits. And what I read to you were the limits to us. We can't just do variances, whatever. We can't do planning. We are not the same as the planning board. And we're certainly not the same as the town meeting in laying out what a zone should be. So we actually have limits to our use variance, even though we have a use variance. But that was just, for example, what about this heavy done because you actually spoke up, but I thought I'd try and match some.
Yeah, I would respectfully suggest that the way that the courts have interpreted the law and the way the legislature wrote the law is that the hardship must relate to the shape, topography, or soil conditions that are on this property. And if there are soil conditions, and I would suggest there are soil conditions here, there's significant wetlands here, firstly. Secondly, there is, if you read the zoning bylaw, it says that your board can grant use variances. There's no limitation on that. And I would go back to what I would go back to what I said earlier. If
Well,
If-
actually,
if the suggestion-
There are limitations too. There are limitations.
Well, you can certainly place limitations on a variance
Well,
once
I know
granted.
that, I know that, but I know that. But in the actual bylaw, there's actually limitations to how we do a variance. Would you agree?
Well, it says specifically that you can grant use variances, meaning that you can approve something to go in the technology business district, which might not otherwise be allowed in the district according to the table of use regulations in the zoning bylaw. Yep.
Thank you, Ms. Whitney.
Yep.
Would non-voting members at this point like to make a motion?
Well, if I make a motion, it would be to deny it.
Okay.
Someone make a motion.
So, I make a motion to deny the petition of Mr. Bogan Property Management, 41 Federal Avenue, Quincy, for a use variance under 175-21G5, the special permit, and I make a motion to deny the special permit under 175-21H5 and special permit 175-35G to allow for construction of 2,500 square foot building for use in an arborist business and for open lot storage of materials at 0 Adams Street.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Thank you.
Might I suggest, Mr. Whitney, this kind of strikes me as when we ran into the issue with Cape Cod Lumber a few years ago. And at that point, they went to the selectmen and they had that area rezoned. Because that was something like we felt they were asking for too much for that particular area. And that might be an avenue.
I appreciate the suggestion.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
It being slightly after 7:05,
Whatever, Sean.
the
Yeah,
vice
no,
chair
82.
will read the features of investments.
It's funny, we all.
Let's take a minute. You want a minute?
Sorry, it's getting up for me.
Sorry,
No, you want to get it for a minute?
No,
seventh inning stretch?
Yeah, 7 minutes.
I could use
7 minutes.
Do you guys want it? Want to take a minute?
Take 5, is that?
Sure.
okay?
Probably a good idea, actually.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That way to the next one.
What's up?
Is everyone back?
We're all back.
All right.
Thank you.
Good. Are you gentlemen ready? Thank you for your patience. Mr. Vice Chair?
Okay, the Town of Abington zoning board of appeals will hold a public hearing on Thursday, June 8th, 2017, at 8 o'clock at the Abington Town offices at 500 Winsky Way. Abington Road. Petition of Abington Investors LLC, 245 Central Street, Abington, for the special permit under 175-1A3 to allow new construction of a three-family dwelling and variance under 175-47B to allow separate driveways as located on submitted plans for 45 Suffolk Street. Property is located at Assessors Map 53, Lot 23A, in a R20 zone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman. Sean Riley, 500 Washington Street, here on behalf of Abington Investments LLC, and seated to my right are two of the principals and members, Glenn LaPointe Jr. next to me, Glenn LaPointe Sr. to my far right. I think the board is somewhat familiar with this area because this was the site, this area was at the corner of Bates Street and Suffolk Street was the site of the old factory that sat there for about a century. And Abington Investments had purchased the factory, eventually had got the premise to rip it down, cleaned the area up, and has now redeveloped it and really transformed that area into a nice upgraded neighborhood. In the past year or so, they have constructed new 2-unit condominium townhouses and a 3-unit condominium townhouse. And what we're proposing tonight is the last vacant lot on Suffolk Street would be the location of a 3-unit townhouse, which is pretty much identical to the one that the board previously approved on the other side of the street, on Suffolk Street. So we're here to ask for a special permit for the multifamily use in the R20 zone, and also for the variance to allow us not to build a parking lot, but instead to build typical residential driveways. This land does have a significant amount of ledge and bedrock in the back. I'm not sure if you've been by it, but you can actually see it's exposed. So the back part of the property, you know, is really, you can't build on it. Where that garage is shown is actually sitting up in the middle of ledge. That garage shown on your plan will be removed and demolished. The building complies with all the setbacks in the R20 zone. It's far enough away from the street, it's far enough away from the sidelines, it's far enough away from the rear line. And what we're proposing with the variance is basically, the design is in compliance with the rest of the neighborhood. It would conform, it would not substantially derogate from the bylaw, and it would not substantially harm any of the neighbors. In fact, to do otherwise, I think would harm it because it would stick out like a sore thumb. As you go down the street now, I think you've seen some of the finished products. Each of these units would require 2 parking spaces, so they each would have their own separate and private driveway. And just so you know, if I can approach the board, this would be the alternative. If the variance was not granted, we would have to make a parking lot, which the bylaw requires without a variance. And we think that that would essentially be a tragedy, because you'd have more pavement than we need, much less grass, and it would be the only parking lot on the entire street. It would just look foolish. And we asked the board's consideration that in order to finish the neighborhood and to, under the terms of a variance, I think this is a great example of where it is in conformity with the neighborhood, no substantial detriment to the neighborhood. I think it's a better design and a good finished product if the board would consider the variance. The special permit is required. This board has granted the special permits, obviously, in the past. I do have a copy of the special permit decision. For the other 3-family, we asked for pretty much the same relief for that 3-family as we did for this 3-family. It was the special permit to build the 3-family in the R20.
Thank you.
And it was the variance for allow separate driveways, which was approved. The only thing the other building needed that this building doesn't is that this building is not in the floodplain overlay district. There are no wetlands on this property. We don't have any of those issues whatsoever. This effectively will be somewhat simpler, to build. And just finally, if I could just demonstrate to you, the lots that are, the 6 duplex lots are all at least, or let's just say no more than 70 to 72 feet wide, some of them are 60 feet wide. Those are the 6 lots I showed here in highlights, if I could share.
Do you have any pictures of the actual building?
You know, I don't think I have it, but I think you probably have seen it if you've been there. It exists now. This is maybe this helps you, Mr. Negrelli. This is the as-built site plan that's on record at the registry of the actual constructed building across the street. And you can see, I put in yellow here, the dimensions of that are approximately, of the construction area is approximately 105 feet. So basically, what I'm trying to show you is that any of the lots on Bay Street or Suffolk Street that were 70 feet or less, this board has approved the 2 units, and then we've constructed the 2 units. Any of the lots that were 100 feet or more, we've put on the 3-unit building, and it all kind of fits together in a nice completed puzzle. And I think the neighbors are thrilled. Mr. Genowitz, who is selling this lot to us, owns the house just beyond and next door to this proposed 3-unit. He also owns the multifamily that's across the street. I think it's a 2-family across the street. And suffice it to say that the improvement and the investment that the LaPointe family has put in this area has increased the value of his properties just by being next to, no longer next to a factory, and now next to new units. So the building complies with all the requirements of a special permit. It is connected to sewer and water. It does provide enough, and actually more off-street parking than is required by a bylaw. It conforms to all setbacks, as we mentioned, and I think you can see the proven product that already exists on the street, and I would hope the board would consider this application favorably so they can move forward and, as we mentioned before, kind of finish the neighborhood. If you have any questions, myself or the LaPointes are here to try to answer them as best we can.
Regarding that, from the Water Department, Sewer Commission, regarding 45 Suffolk Street, detailed plans for this proposal, located on Assessors Plan 53, Lot 23A, must be submitted to this office prior to building permit sign-off. And from the planning board, they have no comment.
Right, we have to submit to the planning board. In fact, we have submitted to the planning board. It will be heard at their July meeting. They're required to issue site plan review, so they will also look at all of this, and they're required to issue the special permit for lot coverage, which they've done also with the other 3-unit.
Well, I have actually a question regarding 175-47B, and unless I grab my old book, this stipulates 175-47B speaks to the use of more than one driveway. And what, well.
Recites a lot of things, yeah.
If you want to look it up, but what this is saying is except for 1 and 2 family residential uses, and this is a 3-family, right?
Right.
So no more than 1 driveway shall be allowed on any street frontage. Additional driveways may be authorized by the planning board.
Yeah, and they would do that in conjunction with your, that's the first sentence, you're right.
Are we giving, I mean, do we have the authority? It says a pair of one-way drives separated by a median may be considered 1 driveway. Driveways shall be no closer than 55 feet to any intersection of street lines, not less than 100 feet apart. No driveway shall be closer than 50 feet to any driveway on any adjoining lot, variable by planning board to a minimum of 30 feet. Is this even our jurisdiction?
It is.
That's motion.
No,
No?
no.
No?
I believe it, with due deference to Marshall, Mr. Adams, I believe it is because, as you just read, that paragraph, and it's about 2 or 3 sentences, has a bunch of stuff in it. The planning board is required to have site plan review anyhow, even if you had 1 driveway or 5 driveways on here, because it's 3 units or more requires site plan review. So they will also, if this board were to approve it or makes the decision that you don't have to approve it, the planning board has to approve the layout of the driveways, ipso facto. Or the gang parking lot, the large parking lot. They have to approve the off-street parking. Right, something. It says that no more than 1 driveway shall be allowed on any street frontage. We're asking for 3.
Right.
So I need a variance to that sentence. Okay? Additional driveways may be authorized by the planning board. Well, they would do that, obviously, through site plan review. A pair of one-way drive, well, that doesn't really apply. Driveways shall be no closer than 55 feet to any intersection of street lines. That doesn't apply, but then it says, and not less than 100 feet apart. Well, our 3 driveways are not 100 feet apart, so again, we need a variance for that issue. And no driveway should be closer than 50 feet to any driveway in an adjoining lot, variable by the planning board to a minimum of 30 feet. We believe, closer than 30 feet to the adjoining lot, so we need a variance to that. The planning board can't go more than 30, or less than 30 feet, I guess. So you need a variance to the zoning board. This, as I said before, this is the exact process we went through with the other 3-unit building. And unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, in the R20 zone, if you drive down Musterfield or drive down Bates Street or any of the R20 smaller neighborhoods, because they're smaller lots and most of them are 60, 70, 80, 100 feet wide, if you put a driveway, usually it's on the left or the right side, never down the middle of the lot. And if your neighbor puts a driveway if you put it on the left side, he puts it on the right side, technically it's a violation of the 50-foot spacing requirement. But frankly, it's everywhere in town. A lot of them have been there for a gazillion years, but to create them technically needs, in my reading of this, we need a variance. That's why we applied for it for the other 3-family. Frankly, we applied for it with all of the 2 units too. Yeah, we do for all of them, just to make sure, frankly, when we applied for the building permit, Marshall wouldn't say, oh, we forgot something, or a bank who was lending wouldn't say, we interpret that zoning differently. So I really do think this board has to approve it, and the planning board needs to do it as part of their overview of site plan review.
And for it to look proper, I mean, all the other buildings have the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we want to kind of create a little conformity and uniformity. If the board denies the variance, I don't think we have any other option than to build a parking lot. And I just don't think that's that's again where the board has discretion to issue variances where they think that it's not a detriment to the neighborhood, it's in conformity and with the intent of the bylaw, and I would think this is a great example.
What say you, Marshall?
I think it was after I wrestled with this, I thought it was, I interpreted it differently. And it says,
You read it as I read it?
yes, I see the planning board twice in it.
Right.
And that's planning board. And that's all. But,
Did this board vote on the other property for the,
yes, it did.
did they come in front of?
I think it was done incorrectly.
You granted the variance. It doesn't say, though, in,
It's not specific, and it's open to interpretation, and after I wrestled with it, I went over this and read it ad nauseam, and then came up with, no.
I would just, I'm in a weird position, I'm arguing that he says I don't need the relief, and I say, yeah, I do.
If I entertain this, I think, one way or the other, that he's got the right way to do
Yeah, I would rather,
the right look.
would rather be safe than sorry, and just to further my point, the zoning law gives variances to the zoning board, not to the planning board. Planning board doesn't have a right of variances unless it says that in the bylaw. And you know that there are certain circumstances in here where the planning board is given the right to give special permits. It specifically says, in fact, in here, it says the planning board can issue waivers or whatever. It doesn't say in this paragraph that the planning board can grant a variance to this section. I wish it did, because then we could do it all at the same time, you know, as part of site plan review. And maybe that's something we should update. But as it's written now, I personally, as one who represents banks, buyers, and condominium developers, I would ask the board to grant it, and if it is not needed, then we didn't do anything to harm anything.
Nothing got hurt.
Right.
But
No,
I agree with what you think, Bill, and I think the same way. But there is a sentence in here that doesn't say planning board, and you can say, well, maybe it could be interpreted as, which is has been done. I don't think it's any harm.
No.
I've never, as you, I've never heard of the planning board granting variance,
Right,
so.
That'd be a first.
right.
Hopefully this will end, but in support of what Mr. Riley said, you know, if you look at a paragraph above that, 175.46, they talk about operational parking areas, and they talk an allowance might be made upon formal determination by the planning board for night use for separate distinct working shifts. So it's really talking about the planning board laying out, you know, boundaries within which this construction can be done. But the zoning board is still responsible for the actual bylaws. And so I actually read it that simply the planning board can certainly, within its site review, put in additional driveways and suggest that you have that. But the actual bylaw for itself has to be approved by the zoning board.
The variances, yeah.
That's how I read it.
Yeah.
That's right.
I love them. Disagree when they're on your side.
So, in this case, once again, there are the three prongs of a variance. You know, what is unusual about the lot? I mean, part of it is, you know, we argued the size, R20, the hardship. What is the hardship? Is it financial, shape, topography, soil conditions?
The bedrock.
Bedrock?
And is the use, proposed use more detrimental? You know, so if you think that they have touched on those three.
It doesn't actually say that, I don't mean to be picky, but it says, in fact, it doesn't say more detrimental, it says that, blah, 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 the literal enforcement of the provisions would involve substantial hardship, financial or otherwise, to the petitioner, and the desirable relief may be granted without substantial detriment to the public good, which I would propose that granting this does not have a substantial detriment to the public good, and without nullifying or substantially deviating from the intent of this bylaw. The intent of this part of the bylaw is to make sure there's enough off-street parking, but we also have other sections of the bylaw where you kind of encourage some green space and all. To deny the variance would to basically wipe out the green space and have a, you know, a paved football field in the front yard.
Any,
I have some questions. One, you mentioned about when the old building was there and they took it down, but I remember that vividly, that it was very difficult for me to approve it back then. But I spoke with the fire chief, and you came up with, Mr. Riley came up with an obscure law from the state that allowed that. I don't know if you remember that, and I'm going, okay, I'll go along with it this one time because of the fire hazard there. Because we did allow, in my opinion, excessive use of that piece of real estate.
You mean the old building, the fire?
Yes. And it was an old factory or something like that, and it was very toxic from what the fire chief said. So having said that, I just want to go on record again. That's why I did approve it back then, based on that. But my question is, there's nothing on that property now, and now we want to put 3 on it, correct?
Right.
Yes.
There's a
And that's
garage.
9,000 square feet, which is well below the intent of an
1359. 13,500.
which is well below the intent of the bylaw.
The variance has already been granted a couple of years ago to create this lot, so that's behind
How
us.
long ago was that created?
I have a copy of that, too. Let's see. 2011.
Wow.
Mr. Genowitz has been holding, frankly, here's a copy of the 2011 variance to create the lot. Mr. Genowitz has been holding this lot, frankly, waiting for that factory to come down and for the area to be cleaned up, because he knew it would be of more value and people would desire to live in the street if we could clean up the street. And that's why he's selling it now. He was smart. He's held on to it, and now he would like to see it developed in conformity with the rest of it. He approached the LaPointes and said, basically, not these aren't his words, I like what you're doing, I want you to buy my property and go get the permits you need. So I would hope the board would entertain that, and it'll be, it is a nice neighborhood.
Well, again, I keep on going back to a couple years ago when we approved it. Because I remember you saying there'd be 6 duplexes. Now, my brain took a duplex to mean something different. To me, a duplex was the house next to another house type thing.
That's what
Then
they are.
I drive by it, and they're much bigger. And I've had people comment, how could you approve that, so much of that on that little piece of property? I said, and I explained what I did, so that's it for now.
I think, and I think the LaPointes can verify, and perhaps other board members have heard it, they've received a lot of congratulations. I mean, these things have sold very well, people like it, the neighbors are thrilled with it, and, you know, it's a minimal effect, and it has nice green space.
What are these, townhouses?
Yeah, they're all townhouse structures, so they're all limited to 2 bedrooms, so it's just, basically, they've all been either single people or couples purchasing these units.
And do these have cellars too, or just
Yes.
Yes,
no garages?
no garages.
If I may, the other triplex that we built was on another lot on the street, on Suffolk Street, which didn't have anything to do with the factory. And that house there was in real disrepair. It was known as the drug house. So we took that house down, and we built the 3 units there. And then Bill, when we were done with our project, as Mr. Shepherd said, that's what we came in for, and that's what we asked for before, was the 6 duplexes, and we fulfilled that. And then Mr. Genowitz asked us if we could buy, if I would buy his lot. And we're just asking the board, it's just gonna, it would finish the project. You know, I know you guys are really tough on the variances, and in this case here, it's exactly what we built to the left of on the street. And, I mean, there's really, you know, I know what you were saying, John, about the duplexes, and we did that. We built that. That project is basically done. That's done. And as I said, we bought another property on the left-hand side, and this is the final property to clean it up. And the neighbors are thrilled. All their values went up, and now that's about it.
Since there's no one in the audience, I don't think it makes sense to close it from the table and open it to the floor and do all that. Any more comments from the board at this point?
I think the nice thing about this is that we've already seen what you've done in another project. So it's good.
And the one on the left there that you're building now, it's going to be the same as the one you're building, you want to build, I should say?
The triplex?
Yeah.
The triplex is completed and sold. Yeah. And
No, the new one you're planning on building.
yes,
It's going to be a triplex?
that'll be a triplex, yes.
That's great.
Yeah.
We're proposing, the proposal before you tonight is a triplex, if you want to call it that, which is identical to the existing triplex across,
Same plan.
diagonally across the
So
street.
did you get approved all at the same time for
Yes.
all those?
No.
The one on the left?
No, we did, the 6 duplexes were part of taking down the factory.
Okay.
The triplex, we were able to negotiate with the drug house owner. It was an eyesore in the neighborhood, and it obviously helped us if we could get rid of that. And the other neighbors were, frankly, Mr. Genowitz was one of them, encouraging us to try to knock that down. So we did, we bought that, knocked it down, put the triplex there. And then Mr. Genowitz says, here's the last lot, let's finish it.
I didn't get to go by, that's why I
Oh.
didn't get to drive by.
Yep.
So, we'll close it to the table at this point, gentlemen. Well, I just want to, I mean, they're asking two things. One is the special permit, which is regarding the 175-21A3, which is the, that's to allow the construction of the triplex as we've been referencing it. And then, obviously, the variance, which is 175-47B, which is basically for us to give the blessing for the existence of 3 separate driveways, okay? In deference to Mr. Riley, and also as Mr. Adams says, it probably doesn't hurt to vote on the variance in that, as far as we know, we're the only ones who can grant variances despite the cloudy language of 175-47B. So therefore, because it is a variance, you have to look at the 3 prongs. Does it meet those 3 prongs? I think, personally, 3 driveways is better than a mega driveway. You know, they're small lots. It's not something you can't put parking in the back. You can't do a big portion.
It goes along with the
I think
others.
it gets itself over the bar of a variance on my end. So those are the 2 things that we're making, we have to make our decisions on. That said, if you gentlemen have any more comments or someone wants to make a motion?
Sure.
At this moment.
I'll make a motion to approve the petition of Abington Investments LLC, 245 Central Street, Abington, for a special permit under 175-21A3 to allow new construction of a 3-family dwelling, and a variance under 175-47B to allow separate driveways as located on submitted plan on 45 Suffolk Street. The property is located on our Assessor's Map 53, Lot 23A in the R20 zone.
Motion, do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
At this point, gentlemen, we're going to come back around to the minutes from May 11th. Okay, we'll need a couple minutes to read those.
Quick question, did any of the board members, have you seen the project down there?
I've driven by it, I can,
3 times,
Yeah.
because I kept on trying to figure out what a duplex was.
Okay. I brought your name, so, I had a man stop by today, we were paving out front there, and he just stopped and he said, I used to live up on Margaret Road. He says, I live over in Leisure Woods. He says, I just want to tell you, he said, you've done a great job here. We was really thrilled that we took the factory down and we built it. And, we try to do I think we try to do the right thing in the town. And we're going to be coming in front of the board shortly with some senior housing up near the senior center. And,
You setting us up?
excuse me?
You're setting us up?
setting us.
Well, no,
We're being recorded.
I'm nervous now about
being recorded, so-
variances and this, that, and the other, but,
What do you mean now? Weren't you before?
I was then too, but.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
it was a fantastic project. I actually live across the way more
Let me go check.
Seen the factory then.
So I saw that, yeah, I did read about it actually. So apparently that's Mr. Arnold's shoot. I think it was Mr. Arnold's.
No, that was the Victory Webbing Factory, all right? It wasn't an Arnold Shoe Factory. The one near Arnold Park, the big brick building that still stands, that was the Arnold Shoe Factory.
Yeah, I was trying to
That's
think where it was.
beautiful.
John, one moment, please. We just got to vote on it.
Okay.
Sorry, I want to get out of your way. Good night, guys.
Good night.
Okay, go ahead.
We may as well have it live.
Yeah.
Such must-see TV anyways.
Just the
2
minutes.
things that took us, ooh,
Oh, my God.
Minutes?
Would anyone like to make a motion regarding the minutes on May 11th, 2017?
You know, I just want to mention that I think it's kind of funny that they, on this property here, what is it, what do we call it,
Zero Adams.
that they have 250 dumpsters on site. I mean, is that something that should be looked into? I mean,
See, that, Marshall, by the way, has that one, I think. You might want to ask him that.
I just wanted to bring up, Marshall, that they had mentioned in last month's minutes that there's 250 dumpsters on that property. I mean, do they have a right to do that, to store dumpsters there?
I don't know who's storing them out there. I had a couple weeks ago, I had a note from the planning board. They wanted to know what was going on. They'd seen some activity down between 1295 and 1325. And I went down, and they have a crushing, an operation for recycling. And I contacted the owner and asked, and I think it begins with a G, and I can't remember the name. And I said, you know, the planning board has asked, but I don't have any complaints. He says he's been doing this for umpteen years down there.
On that property?
On that property. And I asked him to, I don't have anything.
Yeah.
And I said, he said he'd been questioned on this before. And I said,
We send
I have nothing in the office. So he is, I said, let it continue to operate as long as you seek counsel and bring in all the information with regards to proving that you're either your grandfather or you're going to be, applying for a permit to continue the operation. And they brought in the paperwork. I just started reading it today, as a matter of fact. And
So it would have to predate 2000.
October 23rd of 2000. And on a brief overview, looking at it, it looks like he does. And after I'm through with my investigation of it, I will be forwarding all that to council for their determination.
I just thought it was kind of strange that that was being used, and, I mean, if they're crushing barrels, what type of barrels are
Not
they?
barrels,
They make it-
recycling material,
Oh, okay.
asphalt and the like, I guess.
Asphalt, wow, that's hazardous material today.
Well, concrete,
That's-
bituminous, concrete and whatnot, but, yeah,
There's
it's
a lot
been
of that
going
goes to
on
matching
since it was
plants.
industrial, and it was, I looked up and that was an allowed use in the industrial district at that time, so
Industrial.
it may be a grandfathered use.
Okay, I was just wondering about that, because that was brought up in the meeting, and it kind of
No,
hit me like,
and-
oh,
And then we've got this, the guys here with the logs and whatnot, and the chips and the wood and whatnot.
Right.
But, and in terms of TB and maybe rezoning is the more appropriate thing for that area. With all that going on, and then you've got that rail crane that I permitted across the street for the concrete industries
Yeah.
here, they're making walls and.
Yeah.
I haven't looked into whether they're dumpsters or what it is that they've got stored out there. I
They
looked at
have, I've been there. It's one huge,
it is, I looked at a Google Earth. And I
no,
went-
one big, long,
this town needs a drone.
and he drops it.
Drone with a camera.
It goes from one end of this to the other end, and they're just dropping stuff in there. It's pretty huge. I've never seen one that big.
Yeah, and I don't know whose
Yeah.
operation that is.
So cycle back around.
To be
real
honest
quick,
with you,
guys.
I'd never seen it before or heard of it before, when I got the thing from the planning.
See, that's so ongoing, that whole place, as I've seen, it was brought up, Alamo, they're coming in there, South Shore went out, but they're being rented out, obviously, in the terminal, because there's two different businesses, I watched them loading up trucks, taking stuff in and out, so,
Well, I've got the dumpsters and whether or not it's part of this Genovese, I think this is something like that. It was, whether it's something, what is it? Geoso.
Geoso,
All right,
yeah.
So
They're a
I think
big company.
If we can hold off a second. Someone like to make a motion on the minutes, May 11th?
I motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Someone want to make a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.
Okay.
Now you may talk.
I just thought I'd bring it up, Marshall, that's all. I just thought it was something of interest.
Well, unfortunately, I'm going to have to go down there and take a look and find out what it is.
Yeah, I got you, yeah.
My spare time.
Yeah, you just need to get in that Charger and drive right up there.
Yeah, that'll be perfect, that's good.
Bye, Bill.
So did Mr.